Good morning, everyone. This is an interesting ride, this CPC race, and CTV News is reporting, and I think that it's interesting how much weight they give to the idea in this article that now this is an O'Toole campaign gaffe rather than a McKay campaign gaffe. Now, McKay's campaign is accused of stealing the data from the O'Toole campaign, and they're saying that the leak is through this MP's office, through a student in this MP's office, and the student is going to take the fall. They're fired. Done. Go back on the curb. Right? You're done. Okay. Tory MP fires student after allegations of theft from O'Toole campaign. A Conservative MP from Calgary has fired a summer student working in his office following allegations that someone stole campaign data from party leadership contender Aaron O'Toole. Greg McLean, one of dozens of MPs who have endorsed O'Toole, made the announcement in a terse statement circulated Tuesday. Quote, "Upon learning of a breach of trust involving a summer student in my office, I immediately took action and the individual was terminated," McLean said. "This matter is entirely regrettable." McLean's office confirmed Tuesday the firing was in connection with allegations by the O'Toole campaign that first surfaced publicly late Friday night that rival Peter MacKay's campaign hacked into a trove of confidential campaign information and broke the law. The MacKay campaign has denied the allegations and said Tuesday the fact that an MP's summer student was involved raises new questions about whether O'Toole's campaign is improperly using House of Commons resources on his leadership bid. O'Toole has previously been scrutinized for using his parliamentary email address to facilitate campaign endorsements, as had one of his supporters, Senator Leo Housakis. Quote, "Given Mr. McLean's statement today that this is looking more like a story of the O'Toole campaign's negligence rather than the sinister attack on the internal information they are trying to allege," McKay campaign spokesman Jordan Paquette said in an email. "The only leaks seem to be from inside the O'Toole campaign, so as we've said before, they might be better off talking to their volunteers and staff rather than using police resources for their campaign's benefit. None of the allegations have been proven in court. The RCMP and Toronto Police have acknowledged receipt of a complaint from the O'Toole team. Quote, an investigation into mischief in relation to data is ongoing, and we're working with colleagues from the RCMP. Toronto Police Constable Michelle Flannery said in an email Tuesday. A copy of the June 19th letter sent by the O'Toole campaign to police was obtained by the Canadian press." And it goes through the rest of the information. It goes through the allegation, the original allegation, and the evidence that has been released by the O'Toole campaign. I think that it's interesting. O'Toole campaign said, like, we can connect this directly with people on our mailing list. Like, they use the IPs are the same. We can match it up pretty quickly. And they named the person they could match it up to. I think that maybe, like, at best that's a distraction for McKay. I think this is. I don't know that it's going to derail. Like, I don't think there's any outfit that's going to remove McKay from this race. I don't think they're going to say you acted inappropriately and they're going to remove him. I don't think there's going to be consequences for this, is what I'm saying. Maybe legal consequences for the student, maybe legal consequences for Lull, but I don't think it'll get McKay out of the race. So, but I think that it's interesting that it won't, because if, say, Sloan had done something like this, everybody would have been calling for his head, right? So, like, pay attention, right? This stuff is notable and interesting. Another notable thing, it's funny when people tell you that it's raining while they piss on your leg, right? It's funny when they tell you that. It's like, whoa, wait, what are you doing? What are you doing? It's not raining. It's not raining. I know it's not raining. And it's funny when they tell you a lie is the truth, right? This isn't racism, but this is. Andrew Lawton's reporting, as part of its anti-racism strategy, half of all new hires for executive and senior management positions at CBC will be Indigenous people, visible minorities, or persons with disabilities by 2021. Also, unconscious bias training to be mandatory for upper management. And that's in the release that's here. I'm not going to read through this because this is all it's just dense. But you can see here are the bullet points. Half of new hires for executive position, Indigenous, visible minorities, people with disabilities. This is not well thought out. When you start hiring today we've got enough Indigenous people and enough visible minorities. We're looking for somebody with your qualifications, but they need to be disabled. Could you cut off your arm? No, you're not willing. Okay, what, a leg? No? Well, I'm sorry, then we just don't have anything for you. I apologize. Come back next time when we're hiring for skill rather than for quotas. The next guy's in a wheelchair? See you later. Like, what? What kind of crazy world? And how do you equate these three? Indigenous people are the same as visible minorities, are the same as people with disabilities? Or you just need all of those perspectives to be fair? I don't understand what this quota thing looks like. What about people who are short? What about people who are exceptionally tall? Right? Like, what about people who are exceptionally fat? Like, why are we using race and disability? What, like, why not other things that maybe affect more people, right? I think there are more fat people than there are, I don't know, pick one, right? Like, in your office, right? Think about it, right? How many, right? Yeah. So why is it this thing that makes you different, right? That we're going to say everybody has to get the opinions of these people. Why? Why those? It is very, very, very disingenuous to say it's raining while you're pissing on my leg. And it's disingenuous to say anti-racism and then put out a racist strategy. You racists, you race-baiting racists, CBC. Unbelievable, right? And they couch it in, we're not racist, this is our anti-racism strategy. But it's racist because you're ticking a box. Oh, you are qualified for this position, but we can't hire you because you're not the right color. You're not a visible minority. We've got enough disabled people and we've got enough visible minorities, but we're looking for an Indigenous person. Man, we just can't fix that one. Right? And there are hunters in Quebec who have claimed Indigenous land rights. Would that count? Like, could that hunter then apply and fill this quota, CBC? It is offensive. The whole thing is offensive because it's a system that gets gamed. Why not make it for skill? Why not make it for ability? Why not make it for the best person for the job gets the job? That's not racist. That puts your skills at the forefront. That means people will strive to do things they're good at and like to do. If you like to drive, there's a place for you. If you like to sweep things up, there's a place for you. If you like to serve customers, there's a place for you. But we can't just make everyone a rocket scientist by making the credentials for rocket scientists that much lower so everybody can do. Oh, you can't do that one. Well, here's a construction paper and some blunted scissors. Welcome to rocket science school. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. It is a pathway to hell, and we are on it. And we are building the tracks to make other people follow us faster. I don't understand why we are continuing to allow this to happen. It is unbelievable. Sorry for the bonging. I just turned it off. Okay, moving on, because... well, but not really. This is still about racism. This is a hard clip to listen to. I'm going to play it anyway. This is the last half. She stumbles and mumbles her way through the first bit, but the reason it's hard to listen to is because the French is overlaid. The best way to listen to it is to decide to listen to the English. You'll stop hearing the French, but you have to decide to listen to one. It's like a symphony, right? If you listen to the whole thing, it's kind of really cacophonous. So you have to choose like instruments to listen to. Maybe you've never listened to a symphony. Maybe I've never listened to a symphony. Anyway, but just choose the English. Listen to the English if that's your language of you're listening to me, so choose English. And anyway, she just, in this clip, Brenda Lucki confirms systemic racism. Systemic racism, which is a term that Canadians don't know and never ever Googled before up until May of 2020. Systemic racism in the RCMP. Systemic. It's everywhere. This clip sounds, Miss Lucki sounds very certain. She's just super sure of herself. I'm being tongue-in-cheek. Okay, here we go.
At it from a different perspective, in the sense that there are things in our recruiting process, in our hiring processes that exclude certain people. I can give examples, and it wasn't that I was devouring it. I was just not, I was struggling with the definition at that point, because at that point I'd heard many different ones, and when I put it to policing, I was looking at it through a different lens than what I'd seen, but I would never say that there's no systemic racism, and for that I apologize.
I would never say there's no systemic racism, except last week. That's exactly the position you took because you said you didn't understand the definition, and they still haven't defined it, and neither did she. And right at the beginning of the clip, she said, I could give, there's definitely systemic racism in the RCMP. I could give examples. And then she doesn't give examples. It's stuff like that that just makes me howl, right? Like it is the funniest thing to me, except that it's happening. Like I shared this clip and I was like, this is absolutely hilarious, except they're obviously parading this woman out, making her say things she does not believe in order to keep her job. It is very clear at this point that that is all that's happening here. And I mean, systemic racism in the RCMP? Sure. What, could you please define it or show me one policy that's racist or procedure that's racist or structure that's racist? Show me one. Say, this is racist here. And this is always racist. This is always definitely racist. This thing we do here, always definitely racist. Because crises, things happen. And things are said and blah, blah, blah. Individual acts of racism, they're not acceptable by police and should be dealt with by the usual way. Like if you have misconduct or if you do something terribly in your job, then you should be disciplined, held accountable. If you, for example, steal police radios and run a tow truck consortium, maybe it's not the tow truck consortium's fault. Maybe the Toronto police should hold those people accountable. But if you can't say this thing is racist all the time, this thing, we can't do this, right? We can't hold a person who's broken the law in this way because we might hurt them or it's racist or whatever. That's a specific thing you can work on. But if you say, yeah, it's systemic and there's lots of stuff we've got to change and oh man, I could give examples all day, but I don't want to bore you, but I could give them. I could give examples, so many examples, lots of examples. I'm boring you with the examples, so we'll move on. These people aren't answering the question. They're doing this intentionally, but she doesn't believe there's racism in the RCMP. Where's the racism, Miss Lucky, in the recruiting process? Where in the recruiting process specifically? Be very specific. We'd love to hear it. I would love to hear it. As a citizen, as a taxpayer, as somebody who pays your salary, I think, probably, at some micro level, I'm sure. I pay my taxes, so therefore, I probably pay some of your salary. Where is it? Where is it? When did it start? What was the seed of the racism? Is it the whiteness of it? Because that's a problem all across the country. And it's only a problem in majority white countries. And that's a weird place to be. It's a weird place to be where you can't produce anything without it being tainted by this awful plague of white supremacy or racism. So is that what this is? I think that's what they're trying to say this is. I think Canadians don't know what systemic racism is. See, this is systemic racism in Canada, past 12 months. This is June 30th, October, right? This is going backwards. This is, right? 2019, or this is going from 2019 to now. Flat, and then a spike at the end of May in 2020. Canadians don't create systemically racist systems. They just don't. And it's not about white or black. It's about Canadians, because Canadians work together to build the systems that we build. Look at our House of Commons now. Navdeep Bains and many others. I mean, I'm not going to list them. There's so many examples. I don't want to bore you with the examples. But, right? Like, I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make any sense to find racism in all our systems all at the same time. The systemic racism boogeyman right after the COVID-19 boogeyman just petered out a little bit, eh? Really odd timing. Here's an interesting thing. They're trying to tell us that we don't have mental health, and we didn't have mental health. We had mental health in the we had mental health asylums. We had a place for mentally ill people to go, and a place that was safe for them and safe for society and safe for their families. And we had accessibility. We had beds for people. We had 4.1 beds per capita per 1,000 people in 1965 in psychiatric hospitals. Here it is. Between 1960 and 1980, all provinces instituted elements of deinstitutionalization. Alberta moved from having the highest psychiatric hospital beds per capita with 4.1 per 1,000 in 1965. However, by 1980, had closed the greatest number of beds in Canada and reduced to a rate of 0.7 beds per 1,000 population because they moved it to social programs. It was social credit governments that did this, right? Through the 1960s and 70s, the process of deinstitutionalization of psychiatric services grew in popularity. This created a movement away from formal institutions, institutionalization of people living with disabilities, and towards community-centered care. During this time period, Alberta was one of the provinces leading blah, 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 blah. We had stellar mental health psychiatric hospitals meant to help people. There are people who are damaged. I've worked with them. I worked in mental health for years, and I know that this social model didn't work. Sometimes people want to hurt people. Sometimes people don't care about themselves. Sometimes people, to quote Batman, want to see the world burn, right? And sometimes it's not enough to really want them to do better and to give them all the tools to do better and to keep trying and to keep trying, because sometimes they just need to either hit bottom themselves or be caught by a system like a psychiatric hospital. And I worked in something that, not a psychiatric hospital, but the people came and had to stay. So fundamentally, it was destroyed by bad governance. And now they're telling us we need to defund the police in order to deal with mental health. Here's the CBC article. It's just mind-boggling. And racism or anti-racism policies don't fix this. Back to the CBC. Number of mental health calls Mounties respond to growing exponentially, Lucky says. The head of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police said today the number of mental health calls her officers respond to is growing exponentially as she defended Mounties' record against growing calls to reallocate police funding to better fund social services. This is from June 23rd. Today's the 24th. At 3 o'clock in the morning, when somebody is wielding a knife and they're suffering from a mental health crisis, this is not the time to bring in mental health professionals, RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucki told members of the House of Commons Public Safety and National Security Committee. It's time for the RCMP to go in, get that person calm, get them to a place of safety, and get them the help they need. Lucki was answering a question from the Liberal MP Gary, I'm not going to try that, about calls to, quote, defund the police, a catch-all phrase for proposals ranging from reallocating police funding to social services to the complete abolition of police forces. Quote, when I think of defunding, I think more about funding all social services. When I think of defunding, I think of more money flowing to everyone. That's what I think of social service, of defunding. Having policed in the North myself, where in many communities there's no addictions counseling, there's no mental health crisis centers. In those times of crisis, we are the first response, she said. So it's not about defunding, it's about funding everything that goes along. And I think we can work better with our mental health practitioners. This is saying nothing, right? This is saying nothing. This is redefining what defunding means so you can talk about it in a way that isn't insulting to your staff, right? This is a politician's way of not answering the question. And she was caught under fire for it, and that's why she's now mea culping and saying, oh yeah, definitely lots of systemic racism. I could give you all sorts of examples, right? But fundamentally, when you have a government that knew that mental health happens, everybody has... there's nobody in the world who isn't one or two steps away from tragedy, and real tragedy, right? Like cancer or dementia or diabetes or there's something. And it is not great when you don't have any resources, because there are certain things, if diabetes, cancer, you can go to a hospital, right? But schizophrenia, there are things that happen, and if there are no resources other than public resources, they're hard to access. They're difficult to get in touch with. They're complicated. They're not supported by a lot of things. They're not central. And by not supported by a lot of things, I mean transit, and not supported by infrastructure. Often the properties are out and about. And if you don't have a bed, then you have to make day trips, right? Like if you're not living on the property, then you have to make day trips. And that's hard for a lot of people with that socioeconomic status. I know, because staff used to go and drive people in, right? Like that used to be part of the social work job. I digress. It's interesting that we've gone through this social experiment of, in 1965, having these psychiatric hospitals with, in Alberta, the highest four beds per thousand, to having, I mean, the idea of psychiatric hospitals having beds is like, oh yeah, with what money? But it used to be a priority. It used to be just as important. What happened, right? Why is our government not taking care of us? Why is our government making sure that we're spending money on Asian infrastructure banks and not on psychiatric hospitals? Why are they saying defund the police, and having the commissioner still not able to realistically engage with the real corruption and crime and questions about the Nova Scotia shooting and the things that are tangible that we can really fix. Are there systems that are not helpful? Look at them. But cloaking it in racism does nothing to help anyone. Nothing at all. It's just virtue signaling garbage to clear the way, and these are the tracks that I'm talking about, clear the way to further decimate our social services, right? Bye-bye psychiatric hospitals, and now one day RCMP will be, I mean, who knows? Will it continue? There's a black mark on it currently, that's for sure, and it's getting bigger. Okay, Calgary Herald is reporting Corbella. Jay Hill takes the reins of Wexit. Bad news for Canada. A highly credible new leader has stepped forward to lead the Wexit movement. For Canadian federalists like me, it's bad news. For Western separatists, it's great news. Jay Hill, the former Whip and House leader in Stephen Harper's federal conservative cabinet, has taken the reins of the Wexit movement, a fledgling entity that aims for Western Canada to separate from Canada. Okay, and there's more to this article. Here's the thing. Mr. Bernier was a well-respected cabinet member in Mr. Harper's cabinet, and he did the People's Party thing, and not that that is over, that's certainly not over, but look at how that worked through the first election. The same slings and arrows will be thrown at this person, right? Like at Jay Hill. Immediately following Bernier's departure from the Conservative Party of Canada, 20% of people in the global poll said that they would follow a Bernier-led federal party, and so I think it's foolish to think that, and more fool me too, right? Like, it takes a lot to get things off the ground in a political party. I understand that. And there's a lot of moving parts to it. But to think that the attack that they used against Bernier, that they use currently against Scheer, that they used against Patrick Brown and Doug Ford, won't work against Jay Hill just because he's credible in the former whip of Stephen Harper's cabinet? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm totally wrong. Maybe this guy is the guy, and everybody's gonna unite behind him, and Alberta will become its own, who knows, powerhouse that sells oil to the United States. I have no idea. But to me, it seems like they've got a playbook, and if you don't know you're walking into that playbook, they're gonna just play you because it works. Because it works. Moving on. Power and politics. Foreign Affairs Minister, Mr. Champagne, tells the House of Commons Health Committee that he has repaid 2 residential mortgages held by the Bank of China. He remortgaged them in banks in Canada, and it's $1.2 million. I mean, I don't know that you need to disclose the amount, but that's a lot of money for a house, right? Anyway, last one here, international, and I know, wow, we're going, well, I guess 22 minutes is okay. This is Black Lives Matter funding. This guy thinks it's a bombshell. I looked into the information, and he's basically saying that a woman, that Black Lives Matter is funneling money to Democratic political candidates and all the way up to Biden, and he says he's got evidence and all sorts of stuff, and it's quite a scandalous speculative thing. But man, if you're interested in the U.S. and speculative things, this is quite interesting to pay attention to. So I thought I'd throw it in there. All right, thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I did a recording with Greg yesterday, and we were talking about racism because it's everywhere right now. It's crazy. And despite the fact that Canadians have never really heard of what that is, systemic racism. What are you talking about? Oh, I'll just Google that. All of a sudden, boop. Okay, thanks for watching. Have a wonderful, wonderful day.